Welcome to another episode of PC Politics, Real, Raw, Relevant, brought to you by Spectacular Magazine. I'm your host, Phyllis Coley. On September 14th, the Joe Biden for President campaign released a series of ads, including 7 Black men. These ads were shot at a Black-owned barbershop here in Durham, 360 Barbershop, located at 1103 South Roxborough Street. They talked about why it is so important to vote and what is at stake in this campaign. I am so fortunate to have those 7 Black men with me today on PC Politics, and we're just going to continue that barbershop talk. Joining me now is State Representative Zack Hawkins, who represents the North Carolina 31st District. He's from Durham. Zack is a development officer at UNC-Chapel Hill. He has a BA from Elizabeth City State University and an MA from North Carolina Central University. Welcome, Zack.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Greear Webb. Grier is a college student at UNC-Chapel Hill. Hi, Grier.
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Glad to be here.
Thank you for being here. Next, we have David Dixon. David Dixon is from Durham, and he's a community organizer and a graduate of UNC Charlotte. Hi, David.
How's it going, Phyllis? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
Next is Keith Shackleford. Keith is from Wake Forest. He is a defense attorney. He has a BA and a JD from Wake Forest University. Welcome, Keith.
Good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Sean Grier of Raleigh. Sean is a campaign and development advisor and graduate of UNC Charlotte. Hi.
Hey, Miss Phyllis, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. And the last of these 7 wonderful men are Nate Branscomb of Cary. Nate is an accountant and a CPA. Hi. And thanks for being with us on PC Politics.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for all of you for being here today. So, gentlemen, just in case some of our viewers have not had an opportunity to see the ad that we're talking about, let's look at that now.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
But they've got the experience.
I'm still in shock 3 or 4 years later that we're in this position now. Our democracy is at a pivotal point.
From the top, we don't trust our government. We see the trouble we're in economically. We've got 170,000 Americans dead, and yet this president will do anything he can to make it seem like things are better than they are.
I did more for the Black community than anybody with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln.
It's our responsibility. If we don't lead that effort to make things better, we can't ask other people to do it. There is no good reason not to vote.
Right, we need to have individuals that are in office like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
They are our best shot to take us forward.
And that's what makes me incredibly hopeful, but we really do have to work for this thing.
To the thousands who did not vote, we need you to show up for our future and for our country.
You cannot sit on the sidelines. You got to get in the game.
We can't sit on the sidelines. That is absolutely right. So Nate, let me start with you. And Nate, why do you feel that our democracy is at a pivotal point? We can't hear you.
Can't hear me now? You can't hear me?
Now we can, okay.
Okay. I mean, look at what's going on even right now, most recently with the passing of the Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg, right?
Mm-hmm.
In 2016, what happened in the Senate is it's, hey, you know what, unprecedentedly, they said we're not going to turn around and allow President Obama to nominate a Supreme Court choice, right? 4 years later, with even less time in an election, what's going on, right? There was a point in time where whether we agreed or disagreed, there were procedures, there were norms, we respected different people's points of views, opinions.
Right.
Now it's winner take all. It's whatever benefits me, whatever benefits my friends, whatever benefits those that I care about, forget everybody else. And the checks and balances that we have from the Senate, from Congress, from agencies where you're not supposed to have political representation, those are all gone.
Yes.
They're all gone, right? And so how do we turn around, and what makes us special as a country? What makes us special as a people, if not to say, hey, you know what? Regardless of who you are, where you come from, there's an opportunity. And those checks and balances and opportunities are being taken away.
What do you have to say about that, Grier?
I agree. I agree with Brother Nate wholeheartedly. And I think it's so important that we all utilize this important right that we have, especially young people, those of us that want to see policies enacted that are going to make for a better future, that are going to improve our lives. And so it is so important to get off the sidelines and get in the game and get ready and become more energized when it comes to politics, because we know that politics affects every aspect of society. And so he's exactly right. What we are seeing now, we cannot allow to continue to happen. And so we've got to do everything we can, working with one another collectively to provide that better future. And one of the ways we do that is not only through protesting, not only through raising our voices at the local level, but through voting.
Grier, you brought up a good point when you talk about the protesting. Okay, we're seeing people take to the streets. They're marching for all kinds of reasons. How do we connect the dots that the same issues that they're marching for are the same reasons that they should be coming to the ballot box? Zack, let me start with you.
Yeah, well, I think, and I may misquote this, but I think it was MLK that protested the voice of the unheard, right? That's the way they're expressing their frustration with society, and rightfully so, right? I mean, it's one of the things that literally from the Boston Tea Party to date, through Black Lives Matter, when people are unhappy with government, we have to show our voices. But I think it's honestly up to us to break things down. The guys on this call, people who are in the know about the way that politics, and government work, we have to say, if you care about police reform, right, then the police chief is hired by the city. They, and the mayor and the city council hire that person to set those policies and those budgets.
Right. And
we really do, and I think it honestly came up in our dialogue in the shop talk, that's the level of kind of connection that we also have to make for Black men. Because if you look at it, one of the things we talked about on Shop Talk is that the justice system and all these systems have not necessarily been kind to us. If you look over 20 or 30 years, sometimes people say my life has not changed. And so, but we have not communicated well enough how they can change it. And so that's why I'm so glad to have shared the stage with these brothers, because we really did bring it home for people that, guess what, Black men are just as engaged and care just as much, but you need to bring the conversation to them in a place where they're comfortable.
So, and let me go to you, David. So listen, why is it that I'm hearing a lot of Black men saying, if Biden and Harris are elected, it's going to be open season on Black men. What is that about, and how do we counter that?
Yes, ma'am. I think a lot of that comes from the knowledge of Joe Biden's participation in creation of the 94 crime bill. And then also looking at, Senator Kamala Harris's history as Attorney General of California, and then Senator of California. We know that California is the most policed state across the entire country. But I think on the flip of that, there is a lot of positivity that comes from having these two individuals who have been involved with the criminal legal system. From one end, they know their mistakes. They are conscious of their mistakes, and they also very much so vocalize those same mistakes, right? I think Joe Biden has gone on record a number of times in saying that he was wrong in a lot of the things that were put into the 94 crime bill. Kamala Harris has even gone on record saying that some of the, the truancy laws that she was pushing when she was serving as Attorney General were misguided. And both of them have worked in the latter stages of their career to, right those wrongs, but also to push our country forward as it pertains to criminal justice and making sure that folks aren't going back into the system, aren't adding to that recidivism rate.
You were the right person to answer that question.
Well then, Keith, let me ask you then, how do we make people, how do we counter this act? How do we counter everything that's on social media telling us, I replied to a gentleman today who put a flyer out and says, it's the, we're voting, it's two races against each other. So it's the battle of the two races. How do we get our young men, to understand that, yes, people may have, that we're not the same people we were in 1993. I know some of you weren't born, but in 1993, I want to say that I hope I'm not the same person that I was, 25 years ago.
I'm not sure if I followed that question.
My question is, how do we get our young people to understand that, yes, they were involved in those things, but people aren't the same that they were 25 years ago, and they've recognized and they've acknowledged their mistakes.
Wow. Isn't that what we talk about every election cycle, though, is educating yourself on who your politicians are, who's running for office, and taking the time to get to know the people that you're voting for, regardless of party. I think it's the same thing. We're sending the same message. I just think we have to now use the tools that are available to really get the truth out there. Some of what we hear and we know is simply people taking advantage of social media. It's not just the Russians, it's also people within our country that are taking advantage of this. It's old school propaganda. Call it what it is. And we got to fight it back with truth.
Do you think it's enough time? We're 40 some days away, and I'm very afraid that our message is not getting out there.
That I don't know. I don't know I don't have my finger on the pulse of who's not going to vote, who's saying they're not going to vote. I can't tell you that. I just know what in my life and the people that are around me, what I can tell you is those folks seem energized, and I mean both white and black. So I'm, with the surveys saying all that, I can't tell you. I mean, do we have enough time? Probably not. But what I can tell you is in my household, when the Supreme Court justice died the other day, we had a big conversation about that. Everybody in my house and my circle of friends, ripple effect, we talked about those things. I just hope that it extends beyond sort of my age group and my peers into other folks that we think are not planning on voting.
Yeah. Antoine, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll share that I actually have a number of high school classmates that we've been debating back and forth. And they hold the very sentiment that you're saying. Hey, you know what? I don't want to vote for Biden, right? I don't want to turn around and vote for Trump. And on some level, I get it, right? None of us, especially in this community, will have the choice that we all wanted. Number one, if you polled all 7 of us, right, I'm sure there would at least be more than one choice, right, in terms of who would have been our ideal candidate, right? I would have loved someone who could fly and can turn around and leap a building in a single bound, but it's not going to happen, right? But what I'll say is this, right? While people don't like the two-party system, that's what we're dealing with right now. And while there may be similarities, people say, between the two parties, there are definite differences between a Trump campaign and what he brought over the last 4 years and what Biden would do, right? And not just for America as a whole, but specifically for our community. This is a special election, not only because of who we're fighting against, but think about this. This is the first time a Black woman, right, is on the ticket. And it's not, don't get me wrong, she is extremely qualified. She is extremely talented. I would not want to go toe-to-toe with her, but it's also because they understand what's going on in our community and what we bring to the table. So now you get at least a double hitter. Someone who is extremely talented, smart, and brilliant and bright in a Kamala Harris, and someone who understands what's going on in our community. And that says something in terms of where we are, the Black Lives Matter movements, the protests, our voices, the contributions of African-American women to not only our community, but to America as a whole. It's different, right? they may be slow on getting the message, but I think the message is starting to see through.
Yeah, Sean said something really good in our clip. He said that we're voting for our future. Is that what you said, Sean?
That's correct. I agree with everything that's been said. And Phyllis, to your point, I hear that frustration a lot as well of is there enough time to communicate that message effectively to as many voters or the voters that we're trying to target? I believe it is a slow going yes, whether it's church, the barbershop where we filmed, if it's, a conversation at work, it takes that nuclear communication. So in public ed, we used to call it ask three before me. So have 3 conversations with your folks, with your friends, with your advocates before you go to Facebook, before you go to Google, just to set that foundation for how to move our country forward.
Antoine, let me ask you, when you talk about trust and trust in leadership, how do we get that message across that? Well, first of all, let me just ask you, why do you say that's important?
Well, I think that, to put it tangibly, I mean, if you look at the coronavirus response, the countries that did the best were the ones that trusted their government to convey the right information. Unfortunately, here in the United States, we don't trust our government. And that's why you see protesters out there who are complaining that masks are akin to waterboarding, or that masks somehow make you more prone to catching the virus, or that you somehow may asphyxiate yourself if you wear a mask. So, I mean, it comes back to a level of trust with our government, that we trust our government is going to do the right things and we act accordingly, especially when you're dealing with, what could potentially be nationwide or global challenges like global warming, like the coronavirus. But as we come to rise to these responses, we need leadership from the top that we can trust so that we can follow what we believe is the best recommendations from our scientific community or our other experts.
Anyone else? Zack? You talked about, and we talk about trust. You said in there that good governance is important.
Yeah, it's good government, and it's one of the things I ran on is something you should never have to say. Let me say that.
Right.
Good governance and good government, in my mind, means that people know that someone is going to do no harm. Right? I come to do you good. I want to make sure that I bring you back the goods and services, the bacon, the representation that you need, and I will not work in a nefarious way against you, right? Okay. And that's exactly it. And to Antoine's point, people can't honestly say that about the United States government right now. They can't say that, well, hell, they can't say that about the state government, right, Sean? Because Republicans are trying to take away votes. He messing with the postal system. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's across the handling of
Medicaid does not.
Just go do your job and not mess things up, or at least not bring me, any negativity or any harm for me and my family, because clearly we know that it has implications on our communities. And that, again, you talk about, you're going back to the 60s with, the FBI and Intel Pro, and does that make sense? I mean, we have a reason to be distrustful. And so what government and those elected are supposed to do is work every single day to make sure, you know what, if you ask me to do something, I'm going to try my best to deliver for you. I'm going to do my best to represent you. And that's why I'm excited about this transition between Trump and Biden, because I believe we can start to bring that level of trust and honesty and transparency back to government.
And to go along with that point that that Zack brought up, I mean, I think when you start talking about, that building of trust within our federal government, I think that's where you start to see the dichotomy between the two parties. With the Democrats, we believe that government is there for a purpose, is there to solve problems, while Republicans believe that government is a problem, and then they try to shut down government intervention at every step. We don't want to expand Medicaid because it'll provide people health. We don't want to respond to the coronavirus. We don't want, we want to reduce taxes. We want to cut Social Security. We want to eliminate as much government as possible. But we also see that a lot of people in vulnerable communities need that government protection. They need that social safety net. And one of the things, to your first question that you asked, about the state of the election, the state of the electorate, one of the things that really concerns me is that we are increasingly becoming governed by the minority. We look at here in North Carolina, what they did with gerrymandering, where the majority of people within the state voted for a state house member or state senator who was a Democratic candidate, and yet we still ended up with nearly a Republican supermajority. We look at the U.S. Senate, where the Los Angeles County by itself has more people than about 12 states combined, and yet those 12 states get 24 senators. Los Angeles County has to share their 2 senators with the rest of California. When you look at the Electoral College, we have a president who's lost the election by 3 million votes and is now getting to name 3 Supreme Court justices. And even if you go back further, a Republican has not won the national election one time since George H.W. Bush in 1988. And yet, we're about to have 5 Supreme Court justices who are nominated by a president who lost the popular vote. We are more and more becoming a government governed by the minority, and that becomes a government that doesn't listen to people because it doesn't need people to get power.
Right. But at this point, we have to get some people in who feel the same way, who support our interests to even make those changes. And yes. I think that seems to me to be the point that everybody is talking about changes and changes that need to be made. And I agree. But I think that we're not talking about the process to make those changes. And that process begins by voting. I mean, that's my opinion. That first we have to get people who support our interest, my personal interest, for my vote, so that then when you get inside, when you're there and you're at the table, you can make a difference. What do we need to do in these last 45 days? And I'm going to go around the table and I'm going to start with you, David. What do we need to do to help to make sure to get Biden and Harris elected?
I mean, these last 43
days. Is it 43?
43 days.
Okay.
Last 43 days.
Clock running.
I think folks these have to keep pushing. Was it each one teach one, right? If you can have a conversation with one person in your immediate vicinity, how many degrees of separation are we from each other? Have those conversations with folks that you live with, whether roommates, family, friends. Have a conversation at work if possible. When you go to a gas station, we do a lot of voter registration here in Durham. So even if you're at a gas station, hey, are you registered to vote? It's something that small, and that's just going to put that on somebody's radar that they need to participate. Somebody that they don't even know is asking them if they are going to participate in a system that's going to affect them. So just those little things. Touch somebody next to you. Touch your neighbor.
Touch your neighbor. Nate, what do you say?
You have to have the uncomfortable conversations. I'll tell you now, I'm not one that always talks politics, right? I'm not all one to say to paint all Republicans with a broad brush. But I'll tell you, over the last 4 to 8, and even the Obama administration, the times where you see Republicans voting with Democrats and Democrats voting Republican don't seem to be there. When Obama came in office, it's like they blocked everything he did on a party line vote. Right? And so I used to be one of the guys who would respect like an Orrin Hatch back in the 90s or the 80s. Even if I didn't agree with him, I thought he was a principled person. I thought we had the same goal. We may want to go about it differently, right? But there were times where I respected the people for who they are. That time is gone, right? I mean, even Mitt Romney, who you're thinking, oh, okay, maybe there's some semblance of fairness, turns around and now says, hey, you know what? We got to turn around and vote for a Supreme Court justice. I mean, it's time to have the uncomfortable conversations, right? We don't normally talk politics in our community like this. We don't normally talk about money or education, right? We want to laugh and joke. But now it's the time to say, listen, this impacts not only us, but future generations, right? This impacts our democracy and what life will look like for our children and our children's children. This really is that pivotal time.
Definitely. Sean, how do you feel?
I would say, to David's point, talk to as many of your friends and neighbors as possible. We have to keep those lines of communication open. I don't block people that I disagree with on Facebook, Twitter. You know, I see the fake news. I might go in 3 or 4 comments and then say, we need to take this to private message or leave. But what I do believe is by focusing my name and a fact beside it, you know, in response to someone that's not telling the truth, someone else is going to see that. And mine is always going to have citations on it. So we've got to remain engaged. It's not a clean process. And to your point, Phyllis, yes, they have to show up to vote, but we have to expand our political literacy to say when we are done voting for you, we have to remain engaged in the process to hold them accountable. My grandma used to say, trust is the one thing Black people cannot afford. And it's because of the history that she and her parents went through. It was, we can trust this thing, but these bad things keep happening, whether it's a noose, whether it's a fire hose, whether it's voter ID. So what we do have to do is trust ourselves, though. We have to trust that we will hold ourselves accountable to also hold our neighbor accountable and to speak that truth to power.
Grier, as a student, what do we need to do to engage our students?
I think we need to take many of these big issues and make them personal, right? Police accountability, healthcare, environmental justice, issues of education. And we have to say, you know, what do you want to see again for the future? Especially for young people, we utilize social media often. We utilize FaceTime and now Zoom regularly. And so to be able to have those conversations that all the guys on this call are talking about, related to just spreading the message, spreading that political education and literacy is so important. I think it's also important that we talk about plans, right? Young people do have ideas and we do have plans that we like to see implemented. And so on those subjects that I just mentioned, you know, what do we want to see in these next 40 days? We need to talk through the plans that each of these candidates have. And, you know, point blank, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, whether or not you agree with their plans, they at least have some. Trump has none. And so to understand that this is the time, this is a pivotal point, to Nate's point, in this nation where we really want to move forward and really become a respected world leader again, a country that puts decency and our shared humanity first, and to understand that that has been depleted these past 4 years and beyond because of our party system, because of the ways in which lies are spread, the ways in which we demonize each other. We're all people. We all want what's best for our communities, for our families, and for ourselves at the end of the day. And so to understand that people like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are people that are willing to move this nation in that direction. This is something else we talked about just quickly in the shop talk. They're willing to listen, right? And then not only listen, but act on what we're saying as underrepresented people and underrepresented communities. Donald Trump and Mike Pence are not. And so to have that foresight to understand that to be good leaders, I need to listen. It's unmatched when it comes to the 2020 presidential election. It's why I think we must put our trust and our vote in Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And I think young people are ready and willing to stand up these next few months.
Wonderful. Antoine?
Yeah, so I think that going to what Sean said and what Greer said, number one, we do need to reach out and make sure we have that communication with our friends, family, neighbors, as David also talked about. The one thing I always encourage people is to make sure they have a voting plan. We already know that there's going to be a lot of changes with this election to how people typically vote when it comes to early voting hours, when it comes to absentee ballots, when it comes to just dealing with COVID, and making sure people have a plan. So it's not just, hey, are you going to vote? But it's, what's your voting plan? Are you doing absentee? Are you going early voting? Are you going election day? If you're going early voting, what day are you going? What time are you going? What location are you going? Do you know what precinct you're going to? I think that's another issue. A lot of people who typically early vote, but then go on election day, don't realize you've got to go to your precinct. You can't just go to any precinct that's available. So, make sure that people know not just, to vote, but also these are the mechanisms you need in order to get your vote done. But on top of that, we also, to acknowledge what Sean said, is we have to realize that voting is just one tool. It doesn't end after you vote. You need to continue to show up with your elected officials, make sure that they know what your interests are, continue to advocate for them, continue to understand the system and the process about how we get things done. I think by doing that, you'll see a lot more change within our community. And we have to realize that it's going to take some time. I mean, African Americans got to where we are today after 400 years of systematic racism. We're not going to solve it overnight. So it's going to continue to be a process. And also, one of the things that Grier said, not just will they listen, but they'll also include us in the room. When you look at Trump and his staff and his administration, the people he's appointed, none of them look like us. And so just having those people in the room to advocate for African Americans or, for Hispanics, it helps if you have an African American in the room to help advocate, for the African American community. When you have Trump, who's appointed 250 judges to the federal bench, but only 6 of them have been African American, that concern.
None of them have been women. I'm sorry, I need to throw that in.
Yeah, and there have been no African American women. Mm-hmm. So I want to make sure that, those people in the room, that's important. People may overlook that, but having diverse opinions and voices in the room are very important. That's the thing I trust Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to do.
Wonderful. And Keith, we are going to wrap it up with you.
Are you going to reference me? Because, they've been skipping out on me all day.
Say what? So I forgot what your question was. I'm gonna say.
We're just saying what you want to leave us with.
So here's what I'm gonna say.
Mm-hmm.
Because these gentlemen are well more thought out about these issues than I am. I'm more of a passionate person, so I'm gonna say this: our forefathers fought for the right to vote with their lives, and I don't know where I picked up on. Probably my dad somewhere along the way. I'll give him credit for that. Is the importance of voting. It has never been a question in my household about whether we were voting or not. And I think we need to instill that across all of our families and Black families in particular. We shouldn't be having this conversation. Our people fought way too dang hard to be able to go to that ballot box and cast a vote for us to be having this conversation 50 years later. That's what I got to say.
And thank you so much. And that is a great place for us to wrap it up. You're absolutely right. We should not be having this conversation. I should not be asking you why it's important that we trust the government, why it's important that we trust our leadership and we have faith in our leadership. Those should not even be questions that we should have to address. But this is what's happening. But I thank you, gentlemen, so much for taking the time for this barbershop talk. Although we were not in the barbershop, but I appreciate that you included me in the barbershop talk. This has been PC Politics. I'm Phyllis Coley, and I want to thank my guests today, State Representative Zack Hawkins, Greear Webb, David Dixon, Keith Shackleford, Antoine Marshall, Sean Grier, and Nate Branscomb. And gentlemen, thank you so much. This is PC Politics. I'm your host, Phyllis Coley. It's been brought to you by Spectacular Magazine. Until the next time, see ya.
Thank you, Ms. Phyllis.
All right, with me.
Bye. Thank you.
Spectacular Magazine. We on the scene.